So the Grey Knights are getting 8 new sub-faction brotherhoods, and there's a whole bunch of psychic powers shown off for both the Grey Knights and the Thousand Sons. Let's take a look at what we've got. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy-focused 40k channel, where today we're taking a look at a few new previewed psychic powers for the Grey Knights and the Thousand Sons. Today they seem to have focused on the ones available in the sub-factions, so it's not exactly the core of the army, but it's still interesting to take a look. So for the Grey Knights, the biggest news is that they are getting sub-factions, the same as virtually every army in Warhammer 40k right now, 8 new brotherhoods, and each of those brotherhoods will have a stratagem, psychic power and warlord trait. Perhaps just the 3 options. It doesn't seem like they get any new relics. I think it's going to be very likely that they're just going to be minor variants of the main Grey Knight codex. Maybe things like the Grey Knight Plague Companies, the Thousand Sons Cults, and the Custodes Shield Companies. If the Death Guard Plague Companies are anything to go by, it's usually going to just be fairly minor variants on the theme of Grey Knights, but a few of the choices might push you in a certain way or another. Say for example, it looks like the Swordbearers Brotherhood has a particular focus on tanks and vehicles. Apparently the psychic power that you get in addition to the Brotherhood will be able to be casted by any of the psykers within their army, which I think is quite nice. If they had to take them instead of other powers, they'd really be giving up quite a lot to bring them along. So it adds a bit of flexibility. Any of your units might just be able to pop up with one of these if it makes sense situationally. We've got 3 of these new powers shown off. First up, for the Ward Makers, they have Projection of Purity. This one's a 12-inch range Warp Charge 6 debuff, and it means that the unit targeted can't be affected by aura abilities. I guess kind of slightly situational, and you do need to get quite close to the enemy for this to be worth it. But if your opponent has any really big synergy type units, ones with multiple stacking character buffs, it could really throw a spanner in the works to turn all of that off for a turn. Definitely quite a nice one that I think is quite good to be able to use if it makes sense to, but I don't think it would have necessarily been one that I'd just take on one psyker for the express purposes of using that. Next we have Empiric Lodestone. That's an 18-inch Warp Charge 7 one, and it basically means that any Grey Knight vehicles that target that unit get a +1 to their wound rolls when they make ranged attacks. Now Grey Knight vehicles aren't the most commonly used things ever, but that's a seriously meaty damage buff to give to their shooting, and it just means that the one unit that you focus on should be very easy to gun down in comparison to other targets. Unless they mess around with keywords at all, then Dread Knights are vehicles, so getting +1 to wound with your Gatling silencers or heavy incinerators seems like it could be really quite strong. I wonder if the stratagem and the warlord trait will also be vehicle related. Could be quite interesting to see a different variant on Grey Knights being built. Finally, for the Prescient Brethren, we have Fatal Precognition, where apparently the psyker gives the foe a whole bunch of horrifying visions of what will happen if they keep on going forward, and they might literally die if they keep on going if their brain can't handle it. In any case, it's Warp Charge 5 and 12 inches, and it gives you the chance to do mortal wounds if the enemy unit moves, advances, falls back, or charges. You get D3 mortal wounds on a 4+, or a flat 3 mortal wounds on a 6. I must say I'm not particularly impressed with this one. It's only ever going to be worth it if you absolutely know that the enemy unit is both going to move and charge, and even then it doesn't really outcompete Smite for most factions. I guess we'll have to see what the new Grey Knight's Rites of Banishment rules are in the new book. I suppose that access to mortal wound spam is a bit limited, and maybe it might have a place. It doesn't really seem like it'd draw me to take the Prescient Brethren as a faction though, so hopefully their other options are kind of good. Overall, of all the rules in the new Grey Knights decks, I don't really think that these ones are necessarily the most important. You'll usually only see 1 or 2 of these powers in play at most, and really we're going to have to judge the strength of the decks by all of the other new rules. Still quite nice to see though some of the new options that will be available. Moving on to the Thousand Sons, and there's not really all that much more new information about them. They will still get their cults of magic the same as they were previously, each of them giving an extra relic, power and warlord trait. It seems they miss out on unique stratagems, as most unique sub-factions for Games Workshop seem to get 3 unique things. We've seen the preview for 3 of their new psychic powers. One's had a nerf, and 2 others have had small buffs. The nerfed one is the Cult of Time's Time Flux, though out of these it still might be the best of the bunch. It's a Warp Charge 6 psychic power. You pick a unit within 6 inches that have suffered casualties, and you can restore 1 slain Cult of Time model to the unit. It's really quite a nice option to be able to do each turn, as I'm sure anyone will tell you who's played with a Chief Apothecary from Space Marines. Returning a big powerful model to the table each turn just for the cost of one cast is likely to be a near auto-include whenever you can do it. Particularly as those Scarab Occult Terminators will be going to 3 wounds, it could be particularly handy to have people cast that on them. The way it's been nerfed is that it used to be Warp Charge 5, so a bit easier to cast, and if you happen to roll a 9+, you'd actually get D3 models back rather than 1. That could be ludicrously powerful if you rolled hot. In theory you could restore 3 Terminators to a unit just for casting 1 spell, though of course that's only if you roll far above average. Still though, certainly seems very good. Now all the models have more wounds, you'll be getting more wounds back on the table for the cast. The Cult of Knowledge has Empiric Trespass. This one's fairly similar to its previous incarnation, and I still think is quite good. It's now a 24-inch range spell that makes one enemy unit a bit easier to kill. If you cast it, then any of your Cult of Knowledge units get to reroll wound rolls when they target that unit. Quite nice that it's flexible to be used both at range and in melee. It's definitely helpful just to be able to plonk that on the enemy unit that you want to kill each turn, but it's not necessarily quite strong enough that you'd be able to really build an army around it, like that Grey Knight's vehicle one you might be able to. Definitely a draw to playing Cult of Knowledge though, in my opinion. The way it's been buffed is that it's got a small 6-inch range increase, so it's a bit easier to put down on units that are far away. Finally, for the Cult of Manipulation, we have the Attempted Possession spell. It's Warp Charge 5, 18-inch range, and the unit that's targeted takes 1 mortal wound and gets a -2 to cast psychic tests. I would say that is quite a powerful debuff, but it's only going to be any good against enemy psychers. The 1 mortal wound is just a bit underwhelming anyway, and if you're not playing an army with psychers, it's not going to give you that big a boost. Never mind the chance that you do have a good chance of being denied if you try and cast this, as you are guaranteed to be within 24 inches of said psyker, so they should be able to deny the witch. It does seem like it could be very unhelpful if it does go off though. -2 to cast really could cross the threshold where you're going to be failing a bunch of psychic powers, particularly any high cast ones such as Warp Charge 7, which are now really unlikely to go off. This one's been a tiny bit buffed on previous, as it was previously Warp Charge 6 and you had to target characters with it. This one seems not locked to that. So say if you had some Brotherhoods of Psychers on the other side, maybe a Grey Knight Strike Squad for example, then you could still use that on them. Overall though, I think I still like Time Flux the best out of these. Arguably it's been reined in a little, but I guess the actual size and weight of the models that you're going to be restoring has been buffed in the new decks. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I'll certainly keep up the coverage of Grey Knights and Thousand Sons previews as the week goes on, so feel free to check back later if you'd like to see more. If you've enjoyed, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll be reviewing the Grey Knights and Thousand Sons codexes just as soon as I can. We'll probably have the reviews out early next week. Finally, if you have been enjoying the stuff on the channel, I would just like to mention the Auspex Tactics Patreon page, which is what keeps these videos coming quite so regularly. And if you are watching a lot, any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the monthly prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.